Building series organized by the Prem Jain Memorial Trust. Dr. Prem Jain was one of our legendary green building enthusiasts that we had in our country. He did exemplary work for promoting the green building movement in India. The IGBC today has nearly 7 billion square feet of green building space, which is going for certification, or some of it has gone for certification. And large part of this is attributed to the efforts which was put in by Dr. Jain. After Dr. Jain's demise, the Prem Jain Memorial Trust was formed to carry on the task which he had started. And there are many soldiers who are part of this movement and taking this forward. The series of living building is part of the initiative taken by the Prem Jain Memorial Trust to pass the message of the green building movement to the young minds. A large part of our audience today is students, because Dr. Jain loved students. In fact, he always used to be very passionate about students, about teaching, and he had been a teacher par excellence. He was teaching at School of Planning and Architecture, young budding architects, and there were nearly 3 generations that he taught there. For more than 50 years, he was part of the School of Planning and Architecture. This living building series is a 6-part series, and you would recall we had the first one last week. We had nearly 200 people that attended that series. Even though the series is attempted to reach out to the students, is mainly meant for students, and that's why we go down to the fundamentals, but there are many building professionals who also join this. This time too, we have a registration from large number of building professionals who would like to know about the fundamentals of sustainability. In this 6-part series that we are running, we've got eminent speakers who are coming from all over India and who are coming to share the knowledge with a larger audience. We started with a net zero energy building last time, and there were many questions that came in. All the questions have been answered, responded during the session, and the answers have also been put on the PJMT website. I'll encourage you all to go there and look at the questions, the answers, to know more about it. And if you have anything that you'd like to know about, we have Greeno, and Greeno will answer your questions as you put them across. There'll be industry experts who are part of the panel who respond to your questions. A special welcome to all the students from different colleges in Bangalore, Mumbai, Cuttack, Bhubaneswar, Mysore, Mangalore, and many other parts. We have got consent from your colleges to hold this living building series every week during the period of lockdown. You would have noticed somewhere in the slide we mentioned about every alternate week. This is what the vision was, but looking at the response, looking at this opportunity that we have, we are now going to be holding this every week. Next week, you have another exciting session which is coming up, but let's focus about what's there this week. You would also notice that we call this series a near net zero and not net zero, this session especially. You'll find a lot of those reasons and the answers on the website. I've said this earlier also, net zero is all about a journey. The very act that we are living, the way we have lived for so many years, has been always carbon negative. We have to look at beyond our selfish interest and look at the environment and ecology. We have a very eminent speaker with us today who's going to be addressing for next 45 minutes or so. He's going to talk about something which is very unique. I will let him unveil what is coming to you. But a quick word about Dr. Hariharan. Dr. Hariharan is a 1990s pioneer of green buildings and built environment practices. He's an environmental economist, a writer, and builder. He has founded and built businesses that mainstream technologies and solutions for zero energy development that pioneered green directions way ahead of its time. BCIL and Z Homes are part of his work in the past, which have grown to a business base of 500 crore plus. His writings on the economics and ecology of urbanizing have influenced change in many segments. He leads today a consortium-led approach that is called Alltech Foundation to mentor retrofit solutions for buildings with high returns on investment. The consortium is supported by a base group of 9 members who bring rare competence, commitment, and integrity. His consortium offers a wide solutions for energy, water, waste, air management for a variety of building typologies. I can tell you, my friends, the presentation from Dr. Hariharan is very unusual. And me, just an engineer, did have a challenge in understanding what he's putting across, but once you get a hang, it's brilliant, absolutely. I'll have him present in its unique way, and I'll come back to you once he finishes his talk. Important thing, you see on the screen, there are 2 boxes there. One is a Q&A, other is chat. Please put your questions as while he's talking on the Q&A box. I'll pick up the questions at the end of the talk and try to put them across to Dr. Hariharan, who will answer them. We'll have a question answer session, which will go on for nearly 30 minutes once he finishes this. My request is keep the questions on the Q&A box, not on the chat box. It'll be easier for me to follow and you'll have a better chance of getting responded. My last request, make sure your cameras and audio are on mute. This way we'll all be able to listen to what he's going to say to us. Dr. Hariharan, over to you.
Thank you, Ashish. And thank you for setting the tone for this day's conversation. You are right in saying what you did about Dr. Jain. Many times when I had to introduce him to people in the government or elsewhere, I would first say that he was a teacher and then everything else. At that point in time, he used to run Spectral, which eventually became AECOM. And he was so pleased every time anybody introduced him as a teacher. I think it's very difficult to parallel what he's sort of accomplished as a teacher. Some 40,000 architects, and he was an engineer. 40,000 architects who are admirers of his, who went through the portals of, I would call the Prem Jain University in a certain sense. Well, namaste to all of you students from many cities and many colleges. I'm really pleased to see so many of them from across 3 continents actually, and multiple cities inside the country. Some of you are students of engineering, some are students of architecture. Some fewer of you are working professionals and peers and leaders in industry. Before I begin this conversation with you all, I have about 5 minutes of a few thoughts to share and people to thank. So this is going to be more than 45 minutes, Ashish. Well, we'll live with that, but I try and see if I can contain it within the sort of schedules that we have kept for ourselves today. First, my thanks go a little unusual, but I have to say this, to the Nitesh School of Architecture, Dr. Gayatri and Dr. Rekha, if you're listening in. I must say that without the idea being first discussed with the 2 of you some 2 or 3 months ago, this 6-part series will not have become reality. I've done this before. I've done this in a few schools outside the country and then here in India. But to have to focus and make it into the sort of presentation that I am putting up today, it needed that joust with you all, with the both of you. I also have many other teachers who to thank for making this happen. Dr. Nagaraj, Rama Subramaniam, Geeta Vaidyanathan, Mini Shastri, Ami Mangaldas, many others who have done their bit, Ronit, Devrati, Devashish, of course, Sakshi and Payal Jain in the team inside. We have many more sessions to go over this year as we curate some of the finest presentations that make young aspirants like you industry relevant. I'm amazed actually at the quality of responses you offered to questions raised in the reference reading section for the last week on zero energy building design. Never let anyone tell you anything but that you are very, very good, all of your students. I have gone through carefully the answers you have sent in. Your energy and application of mind encourages us to do better and more, of course. Some of you have internal exams across cities starting this week, starting today actually in some colleges. Yet you made time for this. That is determination. Remember, the Prem Jain Memorial Trust will offer a certificate of participation for all those who answer questions of all 6 editions of this Near Zero Dialogue. Your faculty heads will guide you on the details. Let me also acknowledge the presence of many friends and peers who are present, as I said, here today. This show is not meant for them, but some who are keen and have actually made the effort to be present should find some learning. As one of them told me yesterday, you never cease to learn no matter how old or experienced. Our greetings also go out to people in France at 6 a.m. there, I think, and in Brisbane and Sydney, it's 3 p.m. there, who have joined us. From the UK and UAE, there are participants I can see from the list that is on the database. These recordings, plus the reference reading for each edition curated in this series and the answers that experts offer, are archived at the Prem Jain Memorial Trust website every time. Colleges are welcome to hyperlink it to their websites. They'll help all faculty leaders if you think it helps your students on the research that they want to make on aspects of things that we will be presenting in each of these sessions. You could mail Sakshi offline for all students. I'm sure this will serve as an excellent storehouse of learning for you in your own research for effective learning that will prepare you for a better career later when you step out of the portals of your college. So what does this R offer today? I have 8 slides here and a few minutes to spend on each of them. Past this, I have a set of visuals that I want to present rapidly to give you a sense and feel of how you could cast the design keys and approaches right. Let me see if I can share that screen here before I go further. Okay. Just one moment. Where am I? Yeah. Just one. Yeah, there you are. But before I show you anything here, I request you to stay with me on some of these thoughts that I want to share with you at this point. If you create your plan right the very first time,
Doctor, we don't see your slides yet.
Okay, you don't, okay. Just one moment.
Just do the share screen, the green screen button at the bottom.
All right, just one moment. Sorry. Okay, where am I? Are you getting that? No. Just one moment. Just one moment. Sorry about this. I'll go back to start video. No. Just one moment, please. Yeah, I need to share this.
I see you got experts helping you now.
No, thank you. Sorry about this.
No, it's quite fine.
I'm quite clumsy at these things, and well, the rest of them have to start seeing it. Yeah, that's one. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you. You help a little bit.
And
Right,
doctor,
so
you
here we
can
are.
switch off your, yeah, it started coming. Yeah, it's there now. So please switch off your video. You'll save the
Okay,
bandwidth.
just one
Yeah,
moment.
that's perfect now. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I need to switch off video, you said. Let me do that.
It's done, doctor. We don't see you now.
Okay, great, thank you. So we are, let me go back to where we were. Before I show you, as I said, the rest of what I have here, as I said, you need to see how you can plan it right the very first time. If you're smart enough to convince the client company of what it should need as a building or as a campus, and not what the client company thinks it wants, you will have succeeded quite a bit. As I've often said to some of you who have known me, if you know what to ask, more than half your job is done. As an architect or an energy or water consultant, what can you do to interpret the brief of the client and not just comply with the instructions that are set down by the client as a brief? That will help the client accept the larger value you will seek to deliver with the strategic dimensions you bring to design. Think about that. Talk to your faculty about this. Your teachers will help you understand what interpreting a brief actually means. It will then meet the need of not merely aesthetics, but of smart use of resources that plug into and out of every building. Let me tell you what that means in very prosaic and pragmatic terms. In one case of a large apartment project, the client developer is ending up with a saving of 4 to 4.5 crores in capital project cost on a total outlay of about 40 or 42 crores of his original budget on infrastructure for water, energy, and such. After the value engineering that was offered, their annual recurring cost is also set to fall by about 4 crores in one aspect of the work that we are sort of bringing in as intervention. In another case, an existing mall with about 8 lakh square feet is securing a set of installations on wastewater management with a drop in freshwater demand of as much as 90% and a drop in energy bills of about 25% of that part of the mall's bills. In this case of the mall, the quantum of water that they were saving in terms of import by tankers and such was about 180,000 liters a day. Of course, the reduction in abuse of groundwater withdrawal by tankers is enormous, and you can understand all the ecological impact, positively speaking, that can come from such effort. Just 3 of our cities, think of this, remember this, just 3 of our cities, Bangalore, Bombay, and Delhi, need 700 crore liters a day. Of this, about 320 crores is just Delhi alone, about 250 or 260 crores is Bombay, and the rest, about 130 to 132 crores is Bangalore. This is completely unsustainable for the future. These solutions make an enormous difference apart from saving precious cash for people who are running these buildings. Such interventions also address the longer term needs of energy and water security. You know that people are talking about resilience and sustainability and such. It also opens opportunity up for investments that are rewarding for the client's business. How do we work such solutions that are ecologically and economically effective? How much of it depends on what you do as architects or as consulting professionals in energy and water and waste management and such in the design approaches that you bring to the table right at the start? In the next few editions of this Living Building series, there will be more such aspects discussed. Interesting that in recent years, as many as 70 to 80% of you who graduated as architects have taken to other professions. Of course, some few of you have gone in for your masters, some to pursue MBA programs. It's a good sign that such multidisciplinary learning is also happening, and that beyond design of buildings, you're willing to look at all else that impacts buildings or the environment in ecological terms. The trick is therefore to combine learning from other disciplines that play a role in the creation of such built infrastructure. Now, if you'll allow me, I'll get on with thoughts I want to share with you over the next 30, 40 minutes. Sorry about that. Well, this seems like a lot there, and I know you can't read anything that is showing up, but you will see that there are 6 broad things that are put up in this mind map. On the left is design keys. Today I'll be focusing mostly on design keys. The second is embodied energy, and this is important for anyone, be it a conventional building, whatever that you want to create as an architect or have been offered as a brief. On the left, you will see waste, you will see air management. On the right, the critical 2 important things, water and energy. You had Ashish speak the last time on energy, and I'll come to what these things are showing in a moment. If I go to design keys, look at this again and reflect on what I said a few minutes ago and on what Ashish also, in a certain sense, captured when he set the tone for this session. The economics and ecology, if we don't know how to combine or make to work together, we are not going to get anywhere over the next 20 years of buildings. Remember that India today has about 150 to 160 billion square feet. And this figure, I don't know how it's going to change post-COVID, but is set to rise at least to about 350 to 400 billion square feet. And about 20 years ago, in 99, 2000, we were at about half today's figures, at about 80 million square feet. So if we want, well, GDP is a 4-letter word, a bad word to be using, but if we want growth, economic growth of a certain kind, we need to balance it with what we will do to keep ourselves resource sensitive. Equity and endogeneity, I'm not going to dwell upon this, but I'd request you all as students to check this out. What is equity and what is endogeneity? How much can we stick to making things that are traditional, that we learn from our own past, while we do what we can to blend it with contemporary knowledge of engineering, shall we say. Knowledge is different from traditional wisdom. So how do you blend these things in a way that you're able to get the first 2 priorities right of an equation that offers equal importance to economics and ecology? And that has been my battle for 30 years. For if we went only with a focus on ecology, then you end up having capital not gravitating, and therefore you can't mainstream such sustainability elements into business. If you as creators, as architects of business in a certain sense, beyond what architecture means in the narrower sense of the term, you will have to see that the businessman is also listening to you while your priorities internally are ecologically as sensitive as it can get. Now look at the other 5 or 6 now: cost, aesthetics, function, ease of execution, ecology, and time. Now, if you set yourself as a builder, or if you sort of educated your client, it could be somebody who's building an office space, for instance, and you made him understand how cost and shall we say aesthetics are important for him, for he needs to be marketing his idea to his clients eventually. Function, ease of execution are important for the people who are going to actually be creating these things. For you, the ecology part of it, and how you get the time frames right for your client is also something that you need to dwell on. Now you could mix these combinations. You could say cost and time is of interest to business. You could say aesthetics and function are important for the eventual occupants of the building, while ease of execution and ecology are things that you need to bring to the table if you have to be relevant as professionals. Now look at the other 5. Reliability, economy, that is to the end customer, the end occupant, or it could be your own customer at the project level, if it's B2B. It has to be reliable, whatever you're going to offer as a design and eventually as a product. It has to, of course, be cost effective, because the first thing that anyone asks you in India is how much it costs. Efficiency in terms of how the O&M or the maintenance of the building that you put up is eventually going to cost less if that's possible. Finishes and function are obviously important. Now, if you look at how you can build it, at the very first stage, if you can sit down and say that I will not even get onto my laptop and ACAD and such, before knowing what I will be utilizing as materials. And there's a lot. You could possibly check Green Pro, a wonderful website or a section of the IGBC website for multiple products that have been certified in the last, say, 2 years or 3 years. But if you go back even the last 10 years, there have been tremendous evolutions of a kind where these blends can make it happen at 3 or 4 stages for a building. When you're going in at the foundation levels, then when you build your shell, then when you get to making it into a warm shell, and eventually when you people the building with things that you want to have as finished elements on floors and such. And at every step of the way, if you looked at first those few things that I showed you earlier, and then you chose to see that you did a basic metrics. I'm not asking for anything that is complicated. A basic metrics of what it costs as energy at the manufacturing level of any of those materials that you choose. Now, to make things easier for you, there are rating systems that have evolved in probably the last 2 to 3 years. In a sense, they make your life easy, but it will help for you to do some thinking on first principles to understand how, if you are using bricks, for instance, you're using topside. If you're using concrete blocks, and if they're solid concrete blocks, you're using a lot more material than when you use, let us say, a cavity block with greater compaction strength. So you bring down the weight of the material, weight of the building too. Can you ask such questions? If I'm putting up a 2,000 square feet building, it typically costs you about 280 tons. I'm deliberately using the word cost, and I'm not talking financial cost. You can see that. Now, if I were to do a 100,000 square feet building, how much would it cost me? If that solid concrete block is today weighing about 45 kilos, can I get that cavity block with a higher compaction strength of probably 7 Newton, 7.4 Newton we've been getting in some of these things that we're doing. And with a weight of no more than 18 or 19 kilos to a block of the same size of about 190 mm. How do you take this thinking process to every single thing that you use in a building? How can you avoid, for instance, floor materials on upper floors, which can reduce the base load of the building, and therefore go back to your structural engineer to offer you greater efficiency on the use of concrete or of steel? How can you ensure that the spans are right for any such building? How do you have the structural engineer educate you, if you are the architect, on how just a differential of maybe a half meter on the span can drop use of steel and concrete in tremendous ways? Go back to asking your teachers in the civil engineering department, if possible. Go back to asking your faculty if they can help you understand things beyond aesthetics, volume, and space that you're typically focusing upon if you're in a class of architecture. Now, look at this. Look at water. As I told you, this is, I suppose, the single big challenge that we are going to have the next 20 to 30 years. India 2050. I dread sometimes when I look at the statistics of figures that are coming up. We are today still at about 31 or 33%, depending on who is giving you this figure, of our population being urban. Now, this figure is going to jump to the world norm today of about 50 to 51%. That means 1/2 of what you have as cities is going to be added to our current population. Can you believe that? Can you imagine what this means by, say, 2030 or 2035, when guys like you are in your mid-30s? What is it that you can do to reinvent systems? You can see that there's been tremendous change in the way engineering has sort of addressed these challenges on water. In the last 100 years, we have had one, well, people call it a modern system of water distribution, where we reach out to long distance pristine areas, draw water from rivers, and then have it distributed or fed to our homes and offices and hotels and hospitals. Now, no one has thought of until the last, say, 7-8 years now, of how we must stop thinking of using fresh water just once. Now, how do you take that dimension and look at technologies that are available today in the market in a way that you're able to take that 1% of organic biomass that is in black water, water that comes off your of your pots at home, for instance, or any other place, and convert that 1% into things that can possibly be used at a larger level of organic mass into energy, or you can actually decide to take that away from the system and make for fresh water from what you had as water inside your own building. Now, this applies more in terms of economic viability for buildings that are apartments, shall we say, or things that consume a lot more water than your home. But then if you want to do it at your home, there are systems at 70 to 75,000 rupees, which can offer you 1,000 liter capacity, turn all your black water and gray water into water that can be utilized for your landscape and car wash and such, and take that forward further with another 40 to probably 50,000 investment that can turn that water into fresh water. If you look at these 4 or 5 bulbs that I have put up here, and I'm hoping you can read it all. Ashish, can you read what is put up there? Yes. I know you're muted. Okay. Look at the first part, and that's about what the land has as carrying capacity. If I have, let's say, a 10-acre development that's coming up, and I've assigned you as the architect, where would you come in from? Would you first talk about what I want there as homes? For example, there is one settlement that I'm working on in Bombay, which 20 years ago had 25 acres, and they built 2,800 homes or flats on that 25-acre parcel. That's about 120 homes to an acre. Can you imagine the pressure that is put on the system with the quantum of water that it needs, and of course the quantum of power that it needs? Now take that to an industrial situation, and you will have next week a wonderful person called Padhu Padmanabhan, formerly of the USAID and a World Bank and such, who will explain to you how in an industrial situation, water consumption can be far more intense than it can be in the urban sector of residential and commercial. Now look at the second bulb. We are talking here of grid water supply. These are the sources that you have if you're living in an apartment or anywhere that you live in. A grid water supply could be from any of those water supply ports that your city has got. Some cities, smaller ones, don't even have a proper grid water supply. So you end up either depending upon the borewell that you sort of plunge, or the tanker water, which again goes back to borewells on the fringe of your towns or city. Rainwater and what you can do to harness that or harvest that is something that also plays a key role in these things. Look at the other things on the demand side of what you can do to save. This demand side thinking, whether it's in energy or in water, is not something that the government has been used to. In fact, you talk to anybody in the government, the first thing that they want to do is to tell you that if your city's population is doubling, then they need to look for more sources of long distance water from more rivers. There are no more rivers. There is no more water in all those rivers that you have. Your ecosystems have been decimated over the last 40 to 50 years from about 1970 to a point where they need healing. You need to see how you are not a parasite on that system, the natural ecosystem, that is 98%, 97% of your landmass in a country like ours. You must remember that your city is no more, your city as in the number of cities that you have and the geographic spread of each of these cities does not extend to more than 140,000 square kilometers. If you're in Delhi, you're no more than about 2.5 to 2,800 square kilometers. If you're in Bangalore, it's about 700 square kilometers. Bombay is about twice Bangalore size. Each of these cities, some of them are continental, some of them are linear. The question is this: if you have only 2% of your landmass that makes for your cities, and if you're going to claim from this 97, 98% of your natural ecosystems, all those things that you need in your cities, your city is not going to be viable into the future. And what do you need to do to shift? Water, I gave you this example. Similar things are happening on the energy front too. If you listen carefully to what Ashish presented the last time, and some of the other speakers will in the next 2 to 3 weeks, you will see how each of these things, whether it's at the community level of an apartment or of a ward, or at the level of a city or a town, it is to do with how you can convert each of these things at 2 strategic levels. One is at the demand side, one is at the supply side. I'll take you to what this one means. And you heard some bits of it the last time from Ashish. I'm not going to read this or deliberate on this too much, but I can tell you that there are devices today. If, for example, if you're living in an apartment of, shall we say, 100 flats, typically at about 8 kilowatts, you will have about 800 kilowatts or about 800 kVA, therefore nearly 1 MVA, 1000 kVA of a transformer. What can I do at the transformer level to bring in efficiencies on harmonic distortions, for instance, or on voltage sides that can fetch you 8 to 10% as energy saving without you doing nothing about it? As Ashish reminded you the last time too, remember that everything that we do is about not compromising on comfort or on convenience. Sometimes I would say reluctantly not to sort of compromise on luxury too. But having said that, if you actually look at what you can do to make your cities viable, and I'm a very optimistic person on this one for the next, say, 30 years, it is to do with simple things that you can devise on just these two fronts of water and energy first, and then of course into waste. There are many other things that you can do, as you saw, from essentially driving things right at the first point of an exercise for any settlement as design keys go, and then into each of the other things that we talked about at the levels of how you understand energy, not being only at the active levels, but at those other levels that are not easily understood often. So, well, if I could go into each of these things. I was listening to one architect called N. Mahesh from Trivandrum, maybe a month and a half ago, well before this lockdown started. And what was interesting about this was, mind you, this is an architect who has practiced for, I think, about 40 years, built many of these things, structures in Kerala and in Tamil Nadu, primarily, maybe in other places too. I don't know too much of his work, except for a few things that I've seen. And what was important was that he did not talk about architecture. He was talking about these elements. He was talking about how you need to be looking at smarter elevators, how you need to look at, like Ashish told you the last time, about how you need to look at chilling beams and not false ceilings into buildings that you put up, how you need to look at bus risers and not bus bars, and most of you who are architects will not even understand what that means, and how you need to have destination control. And these were words that most architects refuse to even understand. And they say, well, this is a domain, I'm on thin ice just now by saying that. I don't want to be, shall we say, opinionated on this. But the point is that if you don't learn to work together with engineers who understand what these domains are about, not at these, shall we say, outsourced levels of farming out work to them, but in ways that you integrate their learning and understanding into what you present as architects and as architecture, I think we will not get to be smart enough. And look at this further. And this is on the supply side, as you can see. Well, I am just now wrestling with a situation where I'm telling myself, if buildings have, in some states, for instance, in Maharashtra and in Karnataka, we have this regulation which says that you need to have on the rooftops, on terraces of apartments that you put up, you need to have solar thermal, which is systems that will offer you hot water for some of the flats. And typically, if you work the math, it's no more than about 20% of the flats that can secure hot water in these modes. For the promoter, the cost is very, very small when compared to what he will have to invest perhaps on a solar PV system. But then when you look at how these spaces can be managed better and how investments can be re-engineered, financially re-engineered, you are beginning to understand, as I am now doing, that in the next 10 years, this will be about not simply technology, but about how we shift finances into situations where we bring some innovative ways of offering you benefits if you are the end customer, if you are living in an apartment or you're running an office, in a way that you don't spend much as money, but you get returns of the kind that are good for you, while the guy who is investing is also serviced well. Now, I know I have got you I've got some of you out of my radar just now in things that I have said. I know as a student, when you're 19, 20, a lot of these things don't make too much sense. But try to understand how some of the basics of such economics are part of your understanding when you draw something. I was talking to another wonderful architect called Anup 2 days ago, and he was skeptical of how, as students, you will not want to make the connect or can possibly not make the connect. I do not believe so. He doesn't believe so either. It's like I saw in some of the responses that you offered on the reference materials that we sent to you. I can see that your think directions are right. Your faculty has a key role to partner you in that process of extending your learning beyond simply design into what it costs the earth and what it costs your client. I'll come back here to waste. Waste is typically not something that one would want to address at the smaller levels of the home, but I'd like to think, like Gandhi said, many others, Kumarappa said in his ways, if you localize your solutions, 1970, Alvin Toffler writes in the Future Shock, in Future Shock and in the Third Wave, about how the future is about localizing solutions and localizing use of resources. Now, if you can do something like this in your apartment, in a way that you turn that simply into biogas, that would be great. Well, if you can't do that, what you can do at the city level is to see that you take such wet waste, which is 70% of all waste in the city, and convert it to energy that can power your street lights. We have one system like that in Coimbatore running, which was launched, I think, in March this year. Oh, sorry, it was in November last year. And that system is, it converts about 1.2 tons of regular wet waste at a bus stand and powers about 250 street lights of 20 watts, they're LED lamps in this case. Now, what happens if you have over 20 tons or 25 tons a day? There are systems that are coming in today. If you're an architect, I mean, if you're somebody who's training to be an architect, maybe at some point of time, you want to move into learning more about systems that bring you an understanding of how these elements play a role beyond what you learn as architects or as engineers in your specific disciplines. You could be a mechanical engineer, you could be a civil engineer, you could be an environmental engineer or an electrical engineer. These are the four primary disciplines of engineering that sort of impacts the building industry and of human settlements. For me, it's not about buildings. For you, it's not about buildings either. It's about how your city is going to start making that change. We call it the Living Buildings series because buildings live, just that they live far longer than you and I, as I said the last time too, if you were listening. The important part of what you play is very, very significant, is that you bring to your profession a certain sacred purpose. You bring a value to human systems in a way, human ecological systems in a way that no other profession can bring if you're an architect. Now, typically, though I hate to say this, architects, I mean, engineers have taken sequentially have come after architects, which isn't how it should be, but it has happened in the building industry at least. But if you look at the larger scenario of the grid and of energy in the country and what revolutionary as changes are going to be into the next, say, 20 years, you'll understand how oil is going to drop in demand. You're going to see how maybe hydrogen is going to come in as one of those prospective fuels into the future. Well, renewable energy with solar and such options are not going to be very large at any point in time, but they are good options to use inside buildings. Plastic waste, for instance, is going to change. You're going to have them becoming biofuels. I mean, that you'll be plastic down, sunk under the earth. It'll stay for 1 million years. It's not going to degrade. But there are systems today where you can use a pyrolysis and convert that in less than 24 to 28 hours into biofuel that can run your gensets or your cars, your diesel cars. Now, you must study also what has happened to the bottling water industry. The PET bottles, given its texture, can't be put into a pyrolysis, and you must find out why. I'd like you to read about that. Maybe the faculty can help you understand that too. These PET bottles have acquired a very fine distribution system today where waste is aggregated. And it's a wonderful system that India has, and I'd like you to sort of understand it as you go along. Look at this. It's an extension of energy in a certain sense. I'm not going to dwell too much upon this, but I can tell you that if there is an existing building which is, let's say, 8 or 10 years old, an auditorium or any such large building, if you addressed it, if you looked at what you can do to the system that is already existing on the equipment side or on the low side, as the HVAC professionals will tell you, you can drop energy use by as much as 15 to 18% at the very minimum. If there are systems, if there are systems, chiller plants that have not been in use, and you want to see how you can reconfigure the whole system to bring in other approaches at the federal level, or sometimes using heat pumps. One of you as students, I don't remember from which college, wrote about heat pumps as a response to one of the questions that we raised on the reference reading for the last week. You're right. Heat pumps are a very, very exciting technology at both levels of cooling as well as of heating water, cooling air, that is. And the drop in energy efficiency, in the energy consumption that happens with heat pumps is phenomenal. See how you integrate this. And if you looked at Mahesh's presentations, not that I'm plugging for one architect, but I must say that I admire the work that he's doing, you will see that he is moved beyond volume and aesthetics into systems that can make your buildings live smarter, live better. There you are at the big level. This is what it means. We'll see how Sakshi, as someone in the team, will put this up in a way that it stays on the host website. As I told you, all of you teachers who are listening in may talk to her and see how you would want to take these things and sort of hyperlink it to help your students. Back here, I'm putting this up once again because at the very root of all thinking will be these three sets of things: 4-strand, 6-strand, and 5-strand. This is what I have understood over 30 years of about, I don't know, maybe about 400 or 500 crores of money that I have spent over years to make buildings that people occupy. The key finally is on how it has helped occupants, how it has helped the builder remain, well, floating, shall we say, because in the market that is as bloodied as it is today, it's important for the builder to also get ideas and solutions that are extremely cost effective. It's not about telling him something that can mean a possible return over the next 5 years when cash flows are hurting him badly in the moment, in the present. So think constantly of what your client wants. Think of what your planet wants or your city wants. I will stop here. Ashish, can you come to my rescue? Can I hear you first before I open this for others to come in?
Yes, Doctor, I'm right here.
Thank you.
And yeah.
Now from here, we, shall we say, can we open this to questions? Has it been interesting enough for people to want to sort of engage with us today?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I'll request everyone, each one of you to, there are more than 200, nearly 250 people which are there today with us.
Good Lord, thank you once again. Yeah.
And can I request all of you to start putting your questions to Dr. Hariharan on the Q&A box which is there. I've got some questions start coming in. I'll start asking him. First, Doctor, I just want to put a question from my side. I know you're doing a lot of work on the water conservation, and your work has been exemplary in that area.
Sure.
And especially for a city like Bangalore, which is sort of termed as a city, first city in India which will go without water, what they call a day zero city. Could you tell us what is happening for water conservation in Bangalore, and what do you see as in future?
Well, you must remember that in 1980, we were a city of 2 million people. we were about the same size as Singapore. In 1977, I think, there was a delegation from Singapore which came to Bangalore to understand this as a model city for their plan, their Singapore 2010 plan. And that is how good Bangalore was at that point in time. We had about 300 lakes. This is, as you know, a continental city. This has, for the last 400 or 500 years, traditionally has had a phenomenal network of and a cascade of lakes, and not tanks. These were created by the Gaudas as a dynasty went between 1500 and 1650 or so. Krishna Deva Raya, this is it is a feudal, whatever, kingdom of the Deva Rayas. Now, what happened between 1810, when the British came, to about 1920 was also reasonably good. They, in fact, augmented the number of lakes that Bangalore had. The population surge happened only from about 1980. In 1995, we were already at about 5 million. And by 2010, we had hit disaster at something like, 10. Today, by the last census, we were 8.5 million. Today, we are about 12. That's Bangalore today. If I were to take to every, now I'll talk in terms of crores instead of million. If we took our 1.2 crore people, and if we had, by even the NBC number, let's say 135 liters to a person, you can see that we need today about 140 crore liters, Ashish. Now this 140 crore, of this, actually officially, to this day, and every morning I can testify to this, that the water supply board, called the Bangalore Water Supply Board, draws from Kaveri officially about 132 crore liters. And there is a sort of data monitor that you can check on the web on this. However, the bad news is that about 38 to 40% of this water, about 50 crore liters a day, is lost in what is euphemistically called non-revenue water, which is, it can be leakages, it can be theft. Now, some of us believe, as water planners and people who have been working on policy, that sometimes such leakages are good because it helps the farmers down the line. And we pump water from a distance of about 83 kilometers. And at that point of the Kaveri, it is no more than about 400 meters, and we are drawing it up to about 930 meters. That's half a kilometer. In fact, Bangalore's water supply, and I will stop with this one for you to ask me anything else, is the most expensive on energy. We pay about 93 rupees per 1,000 liters for energy. And when we sell it, when the water supply board sells it to your home and mine, if you're living in Bangalore, they charge you no more than 9 rupees to 12 rupees. This is ridiculous, and we need to change this dramatically and at once.
Sure, doctor. Let me take a very interesting question has come up, doctor. I think it's a great googly.
Yes.
It says the name is not there, but there's a attendee who's asked, could you give a sequence on which is more critical to approach? First, water, energy, daylight, economics, or aesthetics?
Okay, I would say economics and aesthetics as one bucket, and then would be water and energy. The rest of it will come into place. Like I said earlier, when you look at a land, let's say you've got a 2-acre land that your client offers to you and says, hey, I want to see what I can build here. Your first thought should be, how much is water capacity that I have here? What is the water bearing capacity of this land? The second would be, okay, the client wants me to build X number of things. So in terms of human use, what is its impact on water energy? And then go forward. I'll stop there for now. We'll see if we can give you a more comprehensive response on the Q&A section of the website.
Sure. So there's Mr. Sunil Agarwal who has asked, what is CapEx and OpEx model?
Sunil, you were there the last time too, participating. Thank you for being as active as you are. One is, let's look at, say, a simple thing. Let's say you have a building of with say 5,000 square feet of a rooftop. It could be an office block. It could be an apartment. We could come and tell you, well, you could use at about 100 square feet each, you can build about 50 kilowatts of a solar option. And we can give you a cost for it. We meaning anybody in the industry. They could turn around and tell you, okay, you don't have the money. We'll come back to you with a structure where if you are paying today 10, 11, 12 rupees per unit, depending on which city and state you are in, we can convert that into an option where at the financially engineered levels, it'll cost you, could be 5, 7, 8 rupees per unit. I'll stop there. That becomes the OpEx model, continues maybe for 5 to 6 years or 7 years, after which they exit, the guys who put in the monies. And you continue to own the asset that will have gone on to your building. It could be in office.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you. So as Doctor mentioned just now, that all these responses, the queries that you're putting in would be put on the website.
Right.
The Greeno would answer that for you. Greeno is anything you want to know about green.
Yes.
So it'll be there on the website. You can get more detailed responses from Doctor. The next question, Doctor, which is there is from Mr. Sunil Nandipati, which says that how embodied energy of building materials affect the service life of building.
I think you'll be better equipped to answer that question.
Doc, I'll let you take that one. Embodied energy is not my strength, I would say.
Fair. I think this requires a more detailed response, but having said that, let me take only 30 seconds on this. Any material that you're going to buy, you have to just understand how much is transportation energy, how much is manufacturing energy at the place where it is being manufactured. If it's a material that is very intense on energy use, you would want to avoid that and look for an alternate option. While you need to, of course, keep in mind reliability and all those factors, the 5 factors that the customer is interested in. I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you. There is a question from my friend, Ashok from Chennai.
Yes.
He's an architect, practicing architect. He's asking that, is there a net zero building in reality, which is true to its definition in absolute terms, monitored and certified on a year-on-year basis?
Afternoon, Ashok. Well, Ashish can also answer this question. I'll put it like this to you. Number one is that there are enough certified buildings of that kind. Second is in terms of measuring it year upon year. Ashish?
Right. So I can put that put answer to that. So Ashok, there is a rating system which is out now from IGBC, Indian Green Building Council. It's called Net Zero Energy Building Rating System. There, the requirement is that you get a rating only after the 1-year data is monitored and submitted by the building owner, and the rating can be sustained only if that data is available year after year. In fact, we are also going to make it compulsory that that data has to be put in public domain in coming years. So yes, it will happen. So next question is a very interesting one, Doctor. And since you are into a lot of sewage treatment, Mr. Apurva Shah is asking that sewage treatment technology suggested in your presentation to reuse reclaimed water as COVID-19 and treated reclaimed water. Tests done at developed countries have shown that STPs have showing a trace of COVID-19. Tell us that how this is going to impact the future sanitation.
Greetings, Apurva. I don't want to, make it into a very immediate kind of contextual response. Well, we'll leave COVID aside for the moment. What is important is that between 2003 and 2005, there was tremendous advancement in genomic sciences, in human genomic sciences. Between then and 2013 or 14, there was a shift in ways that some of the, shall we say, positive fallouts of such research also helped treatment of water. They're all primarily to do with membranes, primarily to do with how we understand the microbial level of activity in water. I do not want to engage on how COVID-19 is sort of, entangled in this whole business of tertiary water treatment. I would rather that I stay clear of that for now, while I'll see if I can give you a reasonable lucid response at the Q&A later.
Okay, so there's another question, Doctor, which is there. Yeah. And it comes from your presentation where you mentioned circular economy. So
That's right.
The attendee, we can't see his name, his or her name,
Mhm.
He says that, could you tell us a little bit about circular economy and what does it mean for the future approach towards strategic planning?
You're all very discerning people. I can tell you all your students are really smart on this. There's so much available on circular economy that you can understand that better. All I will say is this, that circular economy thinking is a sort of advancement on many of these things that we are doing today at the simpler approaches that a certification for a green building requires. From here, you start first. I don't even reckon a regular conventional building to be part of such discussions as you and I will have. But I will say that if you started from there and you went up further, at every step of the way, you will find that it's possible to make an economy circular. Ashish, can you add something to this?
No, I think you've given a great response to it. And I'll just take up because many questions are coming in.
Yep.
Is there a reference guide available for embodied energy of the building materials available in India?
We have certification back-end, whether there is a quantification of such things. I will have to check this out, but it's a good question to ask. We will see if we can come back with a response on the green page.
So I'll just respond to it. I had seen a lot of work being done by the colleges in collecting the data. In fact, School of Planning and Architecture had done a wonderful job where two of the students had taken it as part of the thesis, and there was a compilation done on this subject. So I think a lot of this is work in progress, and education institutions are the one which are going to play the most important role.
Absolutely. You're right.
So the young students which are there should look at taking that as one of the subjects going forward.
Yes.
There's a question from Mr. Daniel Albuquerque, and it's from Goa. The tourist state gets phenomenal rains, yet the hotel industry suffers acute water shortages. A couple of tips would help thousands of tourist establishments.
Only two sentences, Daniel. One, water is not about water. The second sentence, water is about water management. Whether it's Goa or whether it's Kochi, you receive 2,500 mm of rainfall. It's sinful to have a water crisis. I think it's simply about water management, whether it's hotels or homes or apartments or whatever that you have in your state. Over to you.
Doc, I think we got one of the whenever the VIPs here on our call. Shakuntala is there.
Oh, wonderful.
And Shakuntala has asked a question. Shakuntala, incidentally, she's an architect, Mrs. Shakuntala Ghosh. She's also the chairperson from IGBC Kolkata chapter and part of the executive committee at IGBC. Thank you, Shakuntala ji, for being there. Her question is that why are governments at every level not setting carrying capacities for cities and regions? What can professionals do?
Absolutely. I would ask this question of all you youngsters out there and of the peers and leaders. People like Shakuntala have to guide and lead some of these initiatives that we lead. And you as students need to see how you can, I don't know what you can do to push this up with the government. I know that is not a stakeholder group that even faculty sort of engages with. I'll leave it there. These are questions that we need to ask, yes, but we don't have answers.
There's Nazim Khan, which is asking that, is it possible that in future we'll have an Indian standard that residential buildings can apply as an overall package, like a combination of all parameters discussed, like waste management, air management, electrical management, everything?
Of course. Please look at IGBC.in and look at each of the rating systems. There are 26 or 27 of them. Look at the residential rating system, for instance, which is one of the more evolved because it started sometime, I think, in 2005 or 6, and you will get answers to your question. Back to what Shakuntala said, I have one more thought to share, Ashish. See, this whole question of expecting external stakeholders like the government to do anything or to even set benchmarks is not going to happen. We need to look back at what people like Alvin Toffler said in the 1970s, and then to see how we can devise our own solutions within the settlements or homes or whatever that we live in, the workplace and the living place. Over to you.
Right. Very interesting question from Krishna Patel, who's asking that, can adding biophilia help to bring a building closer to net zero building?
Krishna, thank you for being there once again. Last time you had some questions too. I would say a very affirmative, resounding yes to that. Biophilic is of course, important in all these things. How you cleverly position that in a way that you get, like I talked to you about interpreting the brief. As an architect, I would assume that you're one. If you can get your client to see value in that, in terms of those design keys, then you're won it, at least half the battle.
Right. He's also asking, can we know any live example of net zero buildings in India?
Ashish, over to you for that.
Right. Thank you. So, Krishna, if you go to the IGBC website, as I said earlier, there's a rating system on net zero energy buildings, which is already there. And there are 5 buildings which are already certified in last 1 year, the net zero energy buildings. You'll find the data for it right there itself. The rating system is gaining grounds very steadily. There are many more applications now coming in for the building owners who are showing interest in this area.
Right.
From net zero energy, now the standard is moving to net zero water. And by end of this year, you'll have a net zero water standard also, which is available. So
can you share some insights on the net zero water rating, if you can, because we have as many people?
So currently the work is in progress. There are challenges that how do you become a net zero water building, because you have to see the geography of that area, what kind of water capture that we have in that area, where do you store water, how do you look at conserving water. So we had a session with about 150 people about 3 months back, where a lot of such suggestions had come in.
Okay.
And one interesting thing which everybody mentioned was, which I must share, is water metering. Whereas we have a lot of work being done on energy meters, everybody has in the house energy meter, but water meter is something which is left behind. And as part of water conservation, the suggestions were that we should go down to installing water meters at every toilet level. So let's imagine a hotel that you walk in, every toilet, the water is being monitored. In a residential house, every toilet is being monitored, is being put on a screen. So there's a lot of work which is there, and you'll have a rating system out there soon. There are another question which is there from Deepak Sadashiv. Can you take up a case study of building in which you have designed and adopted energy efficient materials?
I think you can take that better.
Okay, so there are we'll try to put up something there. In fact, the last time also I had presented buildings in which I've shown that what kind of energy efficient materials have been used there.
Correct.
That presentation is available on the PJMT website for you to download, have a look at it. You'll find the answers there.
And I think there are references to it in the Q&A section too. Maybe you want to read it, Deepak.
So I'll take the last question, Doctor.
Please.
From Bharat Kamath, another friend of ours.
Yep.
There is a resistance from construction industry to building green, saying costs are high given the availability of natural resources. The only way forward is green buildings and ultimately net zero buildings. How do you see the professionals chart the roadmap towards the net zero building?
Bharat, you're doing it already. I know you're leading things in Goa up front. I must connect you probably to a few other people in Goa who are leaders themselves of opinion. It's a one step at a time approach, and like the old Johnny Cash song. And we need to see how we take this as leaders. You're doing it already. And how do you inspire others to do it is, I think, the question. That's a short answer for now.
Thank you, Doctor. I think great time that we have spent on this. Thank you very much for sharing your views about it. You are a man who's full of knowledge. There's a lot we keep learning from you. I was like glued. Personally, I was glued to the screen. And thank you for doing this. Now, I just want to mention before we close that we have another interesting webinar which is coming up during the talk. And Dr. Hariharan had mentioned about Mr. Padu Padmanabhan, who's going to be giving the next lecture. And he's going to present to us something which he did for his students at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore area, which is very close to Washington, D.C. And he's going to be talking about it. I think, Doctor, do you have any more what he's going to talk on? Could you just?
Well, He's been in the field of energy for from 1973 post-OPEC. It just happened that he joined the energy segment as a professional. Done some very, very distinguished work over the years. He was one of the fathers of the IGBC2, I must say this. He funded at that point of time, I think, about $2 or $2.5 million in 2000 or so for the IGBC to get started. Padhu is going to be looking at the scenario for energy in this decade of the 20s and the next. And it's a very volatile, wonderful situation that we have before us. Again, he's one of those guys who talks about both demand side and supply side at once. Supply side, of course, in terms of how we green the grid at a non-fossil level at the consumer end or the distribution end, while on the generation end, the world has to do a lot more. I think he will come in on some context of this kind. We have had a couple of discussions. I'm going to refine that over the next day or two before we come to you.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you so much.
And thank you all once again. Yeah. All of you students, I really appreciate the fact that you're here. I can't thank all the faculty enough for the constant interaction that you're all doing. I know that two of you this morning have called as many of those students in order to see that they're all back here. You treat them as your own children. I appreciate the fact that you work with as much dedication and commitment with all your students, and the students are amazing. I must say this again for all of you peers and leaders here. It's so inspiring to work with these kids simply because they're so full of ideas and they're so analytical. And we somehow become presumptuous and think we can offer a lot to these students. We have a lot to learn from them, Ashish. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And thank you to the back-end team of PHPJMT for putting this up. There's a lot of work that is done at the back end. So grateful to all of you. And be here next week, Thursday, 10:30. The information will come out to all of you. We've got our next master speaker coming in, who's going to be talking on the Living Building series. So till then, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you all. Thank you, Ashish.